On December the 10th, 2005, at about 14:08 local time, Sosoliso Airlines Flight 1145, carrying 110 souls on board, crash-landed at Port Harcourt International Airport. The plane, a McDonnell Douglas DC-9-32, slammed into the ground and burst into flames. The flight was a domestic passenger flight between the Nigerian cities of Abuja and Port Harcourt. Immediately after the crash, 7 survivors were recovered and taken to hospital. However, 4 of those survivors died in hospital, leaving 3 survivors, 2 of whom were flown to South Africa. In the end, only 1 person survived. It was the second air disaster to occur in Nigeria in less than 3 months, after Bellview Airlines Flight 210, which crashed on the 22nd of October 2005, with reasons unknown, killing all 117 people on board. It was the company's first and only fatal accident. But what really happened to Sosoliso Flight 1145? Why did it crash? In this video, we are going to investigate the possible cause of the accident and what happened to the sole survivor. The McDonnell Douglas DC-9 was manufactured in 1973. It entered Nigerian registration on 12th June 2003. It was owned by Jet Airways and operated by Sosoliso Airlines Limited. The aircraft certificate was released on the 17th of March 2005 and would have been due for another check on the 27th of June 2006. The aircraft was described as airworthy at the time of the accident. The aircraft departed Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, at about 12:25 p.m. The flight time would only take 2 hours and 40 minutes. About 144 kilometers from the airport, the aircraft contacted the airport for initial descent clearance and cleared tower FL-160. The aircraft continued its descent until about 13:00, when the crew asked the control tower about the weather conditions at the airport. The control tower told the aircraft that rain didn't occur. However, scattered thunderclouds were present, which the crew acknowledged. The aircraft then followed its glide path. The air traffic controller cleared the aircraft to land at runway 21, but warned the pilot that the runway could be slightly wet, indicating a hydroplaning could occur. Hydroplaning is basically what happens when your tire drive over wet pavement and lose contact with the road surface, resulting in a loss of traction and an inability to steer the car. The flight crew acknowledged this message. Unable to clearly see the runway through the rain, the captain called for a go-around at an altitude of about 200 feet, approximately 120 feet above the ground. This call was made about 100 feet below the decision altitude. The DC-9 slammed into the grass strip between the runway and the taxiway, 60 meters from the first impact point. The back end of the aircraft struck a concrete drainage ditch, disintegrated and burst into flames. The cockpit and the forward frame broke off from the main body and slid along the taxiway, creating a trail of wreckage 1.1 meters long. The captain was Benjamin Adekunle Adebayo, a 48-year-old Nigerian with a total flying experience of 10,050 hours, with 1,900 of them on the DC-9. He had his last simulator training at Pan Am International Flight Academy in Miami on the 7th of July 2005. The first officer was Gerard Yakubu Andan, a 33-year-old Ghanaian with a total flying experience of 920 hours, of which 670 hours were on the DC-9. He had his last simulator training in August 2005, with a result of, and I quote, satisfying. All 7 crew members and 101 of the 103 passengers died in the crash, or later died from their injuries. The 2 surviving passengers were seriously injured. Many passengers survived the initial impact, but died in the resulting fire. The Port Harcourt Airport at the time of the accident had 1 fire truck and no ambulance. Among the passengers were 61 high school students from Loyola Jesuit College, Abuja. Normally, Loyola Jesuit College students from Port Harcourt traveled between school and their homes via buses. However, the rising crime rates along these roads made parents believe that road travel was too dangerous. In 2001, when Sosoliso Airlines began services between Port Harcourt and Abuja, parents placed their children on their flights. Also among the victims were 2 volunteers for Doctors Without Borders en route to work in Port Harcourt, Hawa Kamara and Thomas Lamy, as well as televangelist Bimbo Odukoya, pastor of the Fountain of Life Church, who succumbed to her injuries the day after the crash. The Nigerian Accident Investigation Bureau found out that the data from the satellite imagery by Boeing, an American aircraft company in the US, suggested that at 1300 UTC, a sea breeze front, possibly reinforced by an outflow, pushed inland in the vicinity of Port Harcourt. The leading edge of the boundary, in theory, could have included an abrupt increase in wind speed and significant horizontal and vertical wind shear. Rain showers and thunderstorms also likely occurred as warm and moist air were lifted into the atmosphere. Data from the Nigerian Meteorological Agency showed that there was a change in the wind speed and direction. As the aircraft approached the airport, the weather was deteriorating fast and visibility was limited heavily. The change of wind speed and direction created a perfect ingredient for wind shear to occur at the airport. As the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were retrieved by investigators, it has been revealed that both black boxes had been damaged. The flight data recorder had a slight damage and was downloaded by investigators into a file. However, the situation is different from the CVR. The CVR connectors were under tension during normal flight time. When the tape was sliced, the spool could have spun freely, which resulted in the release of additional tape into the transport area. There were problems with both black boxes, but later the data was filtered for several times until the audio became reasonably comprehensible. From the FDR data, it was revealed that the flight was uneventful until the final approach. 30 seconds before the crash, the aircraft descended for 7 seconds and leveled off at an altitude of 204 feet, which is below the decision altitude of 307 feet. The airspeed then decreased to 145 knots. Few seconds later, there was an increase of speed to 151 knots, indicating that the flight crews called for a go-around and initiated it. However, the aircraft had sunk well below 204 feet, headed to the left. The crew were unable to recover the plane and the data ceased functioning when the aircraft speed was at 160 knots. From the CVR data, 16 seconds before the crash, the captain called for a go-around, gear up and flaps before the crash. A warning horn then appeared, followed by a too-low gear sound. Apparently, the pilot had difficulty in sighting the runway and should have carried a missed approach on the decision altitude of 307 feet instead of continuing descent below 204 feet. The flaps were retracted and the gear was extended, but probably the gear wasn't locked. The too low gear warning then appeared again and a ground proximity warning system followed. Investigators conducted an interview with an eyewitness of the crash. The eyewitness was a Nigerian Airspace Management Agency security guard stationed about 1 kilometer from the runway. He stated that the condition at the airport was dark and light precipitation was present. He saw the aircraft coming and stated that the aircraft was not stable as it passed over him. He further stated that the approach lights were not on and everywhere was dark and raining. Seconds later, he heard a loud bang with fire and thick smoke. Firemen in the airport handling the crash also stated bad weather conditions as they were forced to reposition their equipment due to high wind. This implies that the crew wasn't prepared to execute a missed approach. At the decision altitude, as the aircraft descended below the decision altitude, apparently, the crew didn't follow the right procedure for a missed approach. Even if they conducted a recovery from adverse weather associated with wind shear, the procedure adopted by the crew were improper. Kechi Okuchi, a 16-year-old student at Loyola Jesuit College at the time of the accident, was one of the 2 survivors of the crash. She suffered third-degree burns over 65% of her body and was initially treated at a hospital in Nigeria before being flown to South Africa for further treatment. She later underwent multiple surgeries and skin grafts in the United States. Despite her injuries, Kechi did not let the accident define her. She went on to graduate from college and became a motivational speaker, singer, and contestant on the 12th season of America's Got Talent, where she made it to the finals. In interviews, Kechi have spoken about her experience and the impact it had on her life. She has also expressed her gratitude for the support and care she received from her family, friends, and the medical staff.